And yeah, we're just going to go through a little bit about what it means to join the Inn, what the Inns are, and a little bit more about what to expect. So yeah, for those who are here in person, I'd like to cover a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So the event will run in two halves. The staff presentation about the Inn should last around 40 to 45 minutes. Then there'll be a short break, and then one of our barrister members will speak for 30 minutes, followed by the opportunity to ask questions during a Q&A session at the end. We aren't expecting any fire alarms today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the green signs out of the building via the route that you came in. The members of staff will be able to direct you. For the Q&A at the end, if you are joining us remotely, please use the Q&A tab on the Zoom banner rather than the chat function. And those attending in person will be invited to raise their hand, and one of the team will bring the microphone over, or I'll probably get you to pass the microphone amongst yourselves, because there's so many of you today. So yeah, I'll give everyone online a couple more seconds to join us, and then we will crack on with the presentation. Okay, wow, everyone else can join us in a bit then. But yeah, welcome to Lincoln's Inn. So I'll start by explaining what the four Inns of Port are. For those of you who aren't aware, there's Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Middle Temple, and Inner Temple. And they are professional associations for barristers and judges in England and Wales. They are the only organizations that have the power to call those that are qualified to the bar. They play a fundamental role in preparing students for call through educational activities, and after call, they support their members as they progress to professional competence as barristers. The Inns have a supervisory and disciplinary functions, and the Inns also have maintain libraries, dining facilities, gardens, accommodation, and a chapel for the use of their members as they train and practice. All the Inns are landlords to chambers and private tenants. We also hire out spaces if you have enough money for weddings and celebrations, and almost all four of the Inns are used as filming locations as well. So inside the Inns, just a couple images of what we've got here. So we've got the Great Hall. Some of you here would have seen that in person. The lecture theatre, which we're in now, is part of the newest part of the building, which is the Ashworth Centre, which was opened in 2018. The reason it still has its new building smell is because of lockdown. We had a good couple of years where no one was in here, so I think it's retained some of its freshness, if you will. Then there's the library, which is my personal favourite place in the Inn. I might be able to show a couple of you up there after this today, if I'm feeling generous. And then the chapel. All four Inns have a chapel because it comes from a time where the Inns used to provide everything for their members, somewhere to eat, somewhere to sleep, and, well, of course, somewhere to pray as well. Now, in terms of the route to the bar, there are several different ways to be called to the bar. So yeah, those of you with a degree will finish their law degree, then go on and make their arrangements for their bar course with either the same provider or a different provider. During that process, you'll need to join an Inn of Court. In terms of the main differences between the four Inns, there aren't a massive amount. We all work very closely together. We're all governed by the Bar Council, so there is a standard that is sort of held and kept between all four of us. We also collaborate and share resources where we can as well. So when it comes to making that decision as to which Inn of Court you'd like to go to, as much as I'd like to say, just come and join us here, it's all about what's best suited for you, which gives you the best vibes, essentially, and the way you want to be when you complete all of this and continue to grow and improve as well. Then as part of that, once you've joined the bar course, you'll have qualifying sessions to complete. You must complete 10 qualifying sessions before the end of your bar course in order to be called to the bar. And yeah, we'll probably go into that in a little bit more detail later. Then at the end, You'll go to your call to the bar ceremony, which will take place probably in the Great Hall of the Inn of your choice. And after call, you must complete 12 to 18 months in chambers, so that's your pupillage, or at another approved training organization. And then for alternate routes, you can do a degree in another subject. You can then go on to do a law conversion course, because that can either be a GDL or other routes that are available. Those usually take a year or two, and then you can join the bar course after that and continue through the route as you would normally. Where can you study the bar course? So there are currently 10 providers across the UK. Some of these have got sites and locations across the country. So again, make sure you do your research, make sure it's right for you. Some will have offers and scholarships for the bar course and things like that as well. So make sure you do as much research as you can, make sure the location's right for you too. Hi, up there. Hi. Feel free to come down. How do you apply for the bar course? Applications for the bar course must be completed through your bar course provider directly, not via the inn. And for those of you who ask, the BCAT is no longer something that is required of students. So you probably don't have to worry about that. It's probably not something you've really heard of or spoken about much before. So I'll try and remove that for the next time I do the presentation. So yeah, this is pretty much the same thing again, but broken down in a different way for those it makes more sense for. Yeah. So you got your non-law degree. Yeah, so the bar course for some providers can be part-time. So it can be broken up into steps. So you can do the first half and then the second half, and then go into your pupillage after you complete your bar course after that as well. So again, depending on your work commitments, your time, family commitments, it might be worth looking at a part-time bar course solution as well. A lot of people do prefer to get it done as quickly as possible so they can move on to the next step. But obviously everybody's life is different. So make sure you're choosing the right option for your availability and your time. Some providers, these are all very new sort of options, will provide a combined degree bar course sort of like qualification. And then of course you'll follow up with your pupillage or your work competency. And the apprenticeship pathway is something that I know that the bar course is currently working on providing. I don't know when more information will be available. I don't know if it might fall through completely, but I think it's definitely something that the bar course is exploring, especially with the cost of the bar course. And obviously everybody learns in lots of different ways as well. So just because a traditional degree isn't the best way for you to learn this, it doesn't mean it's the only route. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a great barrister as well. So these are the things that the bar course are currently considering. Everybody's favorite section, the scholarships and prizes. So yeah, this year, the bar course scholarships have already opened. So if you are hoping to apply for a bar course scholarship, you'll need to get your application sorted out in the next few weeks. The bar course scholarship budget this year is 1.6 million. That's gone up from last year by about £500,000. Sorry, not £500,000, £100,000. Obviously, with the costs rising, even the amounts that we're offering, which are quite substantial for some people, we recognize that with the costs of everything going up, that there needs to be an increase in the amount that we're giving out to make sure it's actually a reasonable amount of money for what is asked of our students. So yeah, we award about 100 bar scholarships a year. All of them are merit-based, so the top students will receive prizes, but the amount that they receive will be based on their background and other components as well. So even if you do receive a prize, it might not be as much as somebody who needs it a little bit more than you. Maybe they live outside of the city, or perhaps they come from a background a little bit less fortunate, but we do try to make it even as fair as best as possible. There are usually additional benefits to being a scholar, like free admission to the Inn. Sometimes there are additional events that you can take part in as well. And of course, the call to the bar ceremony is also free. For those interested, there are also GDL scholarships. So we have 32 of those as well. Again, all values are means tested. So again, depending on your background, you'll receive different amounts. There are also 14 sites available at the Inn for scholars as well. So we do have members who obviously live here, and you can live amongst them and us. Beautiful central London location. But yeah, the rent will be taken out of your scholarship funds if you are a scholar and you do receive that. Okay. In terms of what we're looking for, basically these 4 points here. So intellect, motivation, personal characteristics, and communication. I'll let you guys read through that in as much detail as you need to. I will be sharing the presentation afterwards as well. But you know, when you are making your application, you just need to make sure that all 4 of these points are covered as best as possible, so that we get a better sense of who you are when you're making your application, and making sure that your applications are assessed properly for who you are as individuals too. Yeah, give everyone a second to read through that so I don't have to. In terms of general information, applicants can only apply to one Inn of Court for a scholarship. You do not need to be a member of an Inn to apply, but you will need to join to receive your scholarship funds. You will need to supply at least 2 references with your application. Part-time students can apply for either year of their course, but can only receive 1 scholarship. And international students are eligible to apply. However, they will need to intend to practice at the Bar of England and Wales, which will be assessed during your application. And GDL scholars are not guaranteed a bar course scholarship at Lincoln's Inn. So yeah, if you do receive a GDL scholarship, you will need to reapply for your bar course scholarship as well. Qualifying sessions. So students currently have to complete 10, including 1 from each of the different categories of qualifying session. So there's ethics, standards, and values. There's advocacy skills, legal knowledge, justice, and the rule of law, equality, diversity, and inclusion, and preparation for pupillage, career development, and well-being. So yeah, you've got your 10 sessions. It doesn't matter if you decide to do 2 of each or 1 of each and 5 of another, as long as you have at least 1 of each of these ticked up in your 10 sessions, and you've completed all the rest of the stuff for your bar course, you should be eligible to qualify for the call to the bar. In terms of what qualifying sessions can be, sometimes they're lectures in this very theatre. Sometimes there'll be advocacy workshops, ethics workshops, advocacy and ethics days. So we also have like residential weekends where we'll kind of do a bunch of sessions all in one go. Debate dinners and legal research training as well. So those will all be outlined once you register for the qualifying sessions, so you'll know exactly what you're doing, but there are different types. So make sure, again, you're picking the ones that make sense for you. In terms of additional support, we have pupillage grants to help students during their pupillage year. There are also European and international scholarships, which you can find out more about online. Here's a sort of brief list of what those are. Again, this information will be available. And there are prizes for those on their bar courses as well. You've got the Buchanan Award, which is £100 to students who achieve 85% on their or higher on their bar course. You've got the Student of the Year Award. And there are also various competitions that are happening throughout the bar course year as well. So yeah. Alongside qualifying sessions, the Inn also offers a variety of other student services and support. So we've got European court visits. I think they usually take place sort of just before summer. We had a couple of my team go out to Strasbourg and The Hague this year. And of course, there are competitions as well. There are mooting competitions, journal prizes. as well as mentoring schemes, marshalling schemes, pupillage application advice sessions, and a mock interview scheme that we run here at the end as well for those who need a little bit more support at the tail end of their course. And of course, I hope all of you, if you do decide to join the end, will be part of the Lincoln's Inn Student Association. So that's student-led activities. They usually throw a pretty wild party in the summer as well, that I would recommend you get involved in as soon as possible, if you're into that kind of thing, obviously. But yes, the Student Association is a great network of other members who will be going through similar things as yourself. So yeah, I definitely recommend getting involved as much as you can. For non-members, each of the inns sort of have their own set of opportunities. So we have our Newberger Prize, which is a prize for sort of top students who come from non-traditional backgrounds, as we're describing them. We actually have two of these prizes. So there's the Newberger Prize, and now there's the Helen Grindrod Prize as well. So then in the summer, there's 16 of you, so it's 8 from each, will be invited to the inn for a handful of days to take part in some activities. And we did a trip to the Old Bailey this year as well, which is really exciting. We also have our mini pupillage grant scheme. So mini pupillage is a kind of like work experience where you'll join a chambers for a handful of days. And for those who have maybe higher than usual travel costs or might need some help with funds for clothing or accommodation, you can actually apply for a mini pupillage grant, and we will provide some money towards your mini pupillage to help make some of those costs a little bit better. So that's even before you've considered which of the inns you've even joined yet. Gray's Inn has University Advocacy Days. Inner Temple's Pass program is very similar to the mini pupillage grant scheme. And Middle Temple has the Access to the Bar Award, which provides 1 week of marshalling and 1 week of mini pupillage for undergraduates from disadvantaged backgrounds. So again, I know all of you are thinking about or considering which of the inns to join. One reason to take your time with it is usually when you are a member of one inn, it locks you out of some of the opportunities for some of the others. So sometimes it's beneficial to take your time with your decision making to make sure that you're taking the advantage of as many of the opportunities as possible. And the other inns are pretty cool as well. I mean, not quite as cool as this, but they tried their best. But yes, in terms of advice for students, when it comes to gaining experience, mini pupillages are a fantastic opportunity. They always look good on your CV at any stage during your application processes. Being able to shout out the chambers that you've worked in, maybe name drop some people, it's always going to be great for applications moving forward, as well as the networking opportunities that will be available to you during your bar course and afterwards. Again, utilizing your societies, both law and non-law. Societies do a lot of work to make sure that the bar is as demystified as possible. There'll also be plenty of opportunities for them to run competitions that you might win, which will also look great on your CV. And again, being around like-minded people is a great networking opportunity that I think you should all take advantage of. Realize your transferable skills. Some of you will be coming from non-law backgrounds or haven't done a law degree, but realizing that all of your experiences will help you get through your bar course and complete it to a high standard is something that's going to be really valuable for yourselves as well. Keep up to date with legal matters. I think that one kind of speaks for itself. And also to keep an eye on other organizations as well. There are lots of other law-related organizations that can help you on your career path. And looking into things like the Specialist Bar Association, they sometimes offer mentorship programs and career advice sessions, and again, competitions, which lawyers seem to love. So try and get stuck in as best as you can. And of course, social media. The Lincoln's Inn Instagram page can always do with some more followers, so feel free to follow us online. You might see me on there a couple of times a year as well. Now, in terms of the membership, The benefits essentially include access to parts of the inn that you would otherwise not be able to get to. The library is the key one. The library is not at all open to the public unless you're on a tour or have some reason to be in there. And as a member of one inn, you actually get access to the libraries at all four inns. So they work quite closely together and even share opening times when on the weekends, for example, Saturdays, they rotate between them. And if one is out of action, then you'll be able to join any of the others if you need somewhere to study. The MCR bar and restaurants is mostly open to the public now. But there will still be special events that only you guys will be able to access if you want to. And if you like a coffee and some bossa nova, it's definitely the place to be in London. And our members' lunch, which I always encourage student members to join as often as possible, is again only for members. Takes place in the Great Hall most weekdays, and they're a great way to literally rub shoulders with judges and barristers that are practicing or retired and really sort of share some knowledge. The best thing about the dinners and the events here at the inn is that everybody's so eager to make sure that everybody has the information and that desire to want to continue and improve the bar. And the barristers are no exception to that. They love getting stuck in and finding out about the new recruits and all of that jazz as well. So as soon as you become a member, not even after you've done your bar course, you'll have access to these sort of things. And again, the networking opportunities are invaluable. So definitely recommend you take advantage of them as best as you can. So when it comes to wellbeing at the bar council kind of handles that for all four of the inns. I don't know how out of date this website is, but the bar council provides barristers and chamber personnel with the information and skills they need in order to stay well during their career at the bar. They support members through difficulties that affect the barrister's professional life, and they provide assistance to those who are responsible for or who are supporting those in difficulty or crisis. As a barrister, you're going to be coming across a lot of very difficult things, difficult subject areas. The bar council are fully aware of that, and they've set up as much as they can, even the individual inns, and I'm sure your bar course as well. People on your bar course will be able to point you in the right direction. It's not easy, and personal circumstances can make some of the stuff even more difficult. So yeah, be sure you are reaching out when you need to. And yeah, there'll always be someone either at your bar course provider, at one of the inns, or at the bar council who will at least be able to point you in the right direction if they can't help you directly. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up what I have to say. If you do have any questions in person or online, yeah, get them typed into the Q&A section, or feel free to raise your hands and I'll try my best to answer them if I can. If I can't, obviously you've got my contact details, so please ask them via email perhaps, and I'll try and at least point you in the right direction tomorrow or sort of by the end of the week where possible. Does anybody in person have any questions to start off with? Yeah.
The call to the bar.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. So we have a call to bar ceremony taking place next Tuesday, next Thursday. And yeah, you usually come in, you'll get registered, set up, you'll get your gown, and then you'll take your photographs with your family, have a great wander around the inn, and then you'll head upstairs to the Great Hall where there'll be talks. You will receive your certificate, and then there's usually a reception at the end as well. So you and your family and your friends that you invited can have some canapes and drink some prosecco. Yeah, so it's a really great time, to be honest. It's quite a long day, but it's quite a nice way to wrap up all that hard work you've been doing over the years to get to this point. So yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Correct. So to join the inn is, I think, a little bit less difficult than to join your bar course. You can join the Inn at any stage during your studies. So some people join very early, like first or second year of uni. Some people will wait until the end of their degree course or sometime in between their degree course and their bar course. But the online process is fairly straightforward. They're not really looking for anything particularly, because you can join at any stage. There's not a lot of evidence that they require in order for you to join, but you just need to follow the steps, and it's very straightforward. It's all handled by our registry team, who sort of go through the applications by hand and make sure that you have everything and get back to you and such as well. So yeah. Hi. Mhm. If you're a member of another inn, you will not be able to apply for a scholarship at another inn. And if you apply for, let's say you apply for 2 scholarships before you started, because you can only join one inn, you can only receive one of the prizes. So yes, that is something to consider. The application processes between the inns are slightly different as well. Lincoln's Inn is the biggest of the 4. We take on about 1,000 new student members every year. Some of the other inns are got much less than that, so they will be able to interview everybody who makes an application. But we do not. We have an initial sift first before we get onto the interview stage. So these are the things to consider. You might think you might be better on paper or better in person, so you can kind of make that decision before you select your membership and go through the scholarship application process, I would say. Yeah, does that cover what you were asking? Yeah, me too. Let me see what questions we have online. Somebody asked, could you give more details about the work-based component? It's essentially the pupillage, so you'll be working alongside a chambers for, well, as again, 12 to 18 months. So it's not, I think it's worded that way because there are different types of organizations, but it's essentially the same. It's like an extended sort of like pupillage periods. As a career change, I cannot provide academic references I studied too long ago, but the referee guidance form when you were studying is very academic focused. What sort of referees would you want for someone like me? It's a good question. I would say, as a career changer, there will be an element of a qualification that you will need to complete at some point between you, well, whatever it is that you're doing now and you starting your bar course. So I would definitely look into even that short amount of time, what you can get out of the academics that you're working with. And as I mentioned before, it might be best to speak to either the registry or scholarships team directly. Their email addresses are on the website. So for questions like that, obviously I can try and guess an answer, but they might be able to provide you with a more specific and accurate answer. But yeah, good question. Good question. Anyone else? Sorry, you at the back? Yeah, so it's pretty much the same thing. It might be with a slightly different organization, but essentially it needs to be like, it has to have like the official sanction attached to it. You can't obviously go out and work anywhere. It needs to be related to the bar course and barristers and such as well. So you will almost certainly end up working with the chambers as part of that. There aren't really many other options. But again, it might be something that might be worth doing a little bit more digging into. But from what I understand of it, you'll still be working with law-based organizations in order to get that. So it'll be very, very similar to a pupillage regardless. Yeah.
I just want to have sort of my understanding of regards to
Yes.
essentially, like any time prior to you actually dealing with people in the right time.
Sure.
So if for some change I'm looking at having scheme staff being really for someone who's going on to independent, would this be like the right time to apply?
Yeah, so yeah, mini pupillages can take place at any time. So you're absolutely right about that. They usually last between 2 and 5 days, depending on what the chambers has available. So yeah, just doing them, you can do them during your bar course, you could do them during your first year of uni. Just doing them at all is good, and it's a great experience for you because it allows you to see what it's like to actually work in the chambers, and especially if you try things in different practices as well, you can kind of figure out which sort of subject areas you prefer to work into. So yeah, anytime. If they've got schemes open and you're interested, I'd say go for it. Some chambers don't necessarily have like schemes that they're advertising, but you can still reach out to them and arrange stuff as well. So much like work experience, it's just about getting out there. It's probably a little bit of a numbers game as well. So yeah, get your applications, get in touch with people and see what they might be able to offer for you. Yeah. Could you speak up so the people online can hear you as well? Yeah. No, it has to be after your bar course, because your pupillage needs to be after you've completed all the competencies and things that are related to the bar course. So you will still need to do your pupillage officially. The way it's handled is through like an official sort of like what chamber was the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the word I'm trying to find, but official channels to actually apply for pupillage. So you don't just reach out to chambers. It's actually like a portal that you need to apply through and all of that jazz as well. So it's a slightly different thing than sort of working with like chambers and such. Obviously, you will be working with chambers, but it's going to be a lot more involved. So you will still need to complete pupillage, even if you've got some experience prior to that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you can, there is scope to start a little bit before your bar course. However, with the number of students that each of the inns will have who are trying to get onto them, priority usually goes to those that are currently on the bar course because they have a little bit more of a time sensitivity to it. So yes, there are some or very few opportunities for, I mean, if you're a member, I guess you could sign up. But again, from an education standpoint, we want to make sure that those that need those sessions can actually get onto them. So those spaces are usually reserved for them. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not entirely sure how those transfers would work. I imagine each jurisdiction has its own limitations on the way that they do things, but that might be something that is worth following up with maybe the registry or education department at the end. So again, all of their email addresses are online, so I just reach out to them directly. I'm going to see if there's any other questions online. Are there any specific entry requirements for the inn itself? I don't believe there are, because again, you can sort of apply at any stage. For your bar course, that will be completely up to your bar course provider. As with any degree, they all slightly differ. So it is worth looking at what those options are for the organizations that you are hoping to apply for. Somebody's asked if you can apply to join it in, of course, in your first year of your undergrad. You can, but you may also be limiting your options later on in your, well, academic career by settling or choosing one very early on. There will be opportunities at other inns that you wouldn't necessarily be able to take part in by being a member at one inn or the other. Sorry. In terms of word counts for scholarship applications, that will all be on the scholarship pages of the 4 inns. They have very detailed guides and breakdowns of what it is that you need to provide and how long that needs to be. So yeah, I would definitely recommend looking at each of the scholarship offerings to find out how each inn handles them. I don't know the specifics of the word count per hours. It may have changed recently as well, but again, take a look online. You'll be able to find your answers there. Any other questions in person? Yeah.
Are there any alternatives to tutelage during the postgraduate, during postgraduate study?
I'm not sure. I don't know what those alternatives could look like. Obviously, any experience that you gain might help with like your bar course in general, but the pupillage is obviously a requirement, so it has to be done in a specific way. So I don't know what the alternatives could be.
Could you shed some more light on mini tutelage?
Sure. What would you like to know? Is there anything? No, so mini pupillage can basically be completed at any point ever, really, essentially. So they're kind of like short work experience sessions. So you will contact the chambers and ask if they have any availability. It usually requires some sort of shadowing. Some people will go to court, some people will be in chambers for a couple of days, but the chambers will usually have their processes and their ways of handling that. So in order to enroll in it or apply for it, you basically need to reach out to the chambers directly and they'll be able to tell you the specifics of what they cover as part of theirs. Yeah. Yeah.
This question may be about the Barrister. But someone who's intending to start studying next September for what would be the best preparation in between sort of the year prior?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is probably look to people who've gone through similar things to yourself. There are many forums online. I personally am quite a big fan of the Student Room. They cover a lot of information in a lot of different ways from lots of different people. But basically finding out as many, like preparing yourself in regards to what their experiences might have been like, what they felt like they could have done more of and less of, as well as essentially they'll be able to guide you through the processes in less of a formal way like I would be able to. They'll be able to give sort of personal anecdotes and things like that too. So reach out to or find out about as many people's experiences as possible in terms of like the difficulties of going from an undergraduate to like a master's course. Again, that's all stuff that you can probably learn from people's personal experiences. So I definitely start there, to be honest. Right, so we're going to take a break now for about 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll do our Q&A session and I'll talk from our barrister friends. So yeah, we'll take a quick break. We'll go get some water and then we'll be back in at 4 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to introduce Jack Meek, an employed barrister at the Government Legal Department, currently based at the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Jack is a member of Lincoln's Inn and was called to the bar in 2013. So now I'm going to hand over to Jack. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself and then you can ask your questions afterwards.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alexis. I propose just to keep my introduction brief to give you enough time to ask questions on well, anything you want that's in any way related to the bar. But as Alexis says, I'm a barrister. I practice at the Government Legal Department, specifically co-located within the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So as well as being an employed barrister, that means I am also a civil servant. I should clear that up to begin with. I am not in any way party politically affiliated. I am not journeying to Manchester or Brighton or Bournemouth or wherever else these conferences are being held, because that is beyond my remit. I serve whoever the political masters of the day are. And so I think it's important to establish that, and I cannot be drawn on any political questions as a result. But obviously I'm happy to discuss as much as I possibly can the type of work that I do as a barrister within the Government Legal Department. That, however, I think is jumping ahead a little bit, because the thing I always think it's worth telling people and bracing people for is the fact that it wasn't a smooth journey for me into a career at the bar. So yes, I was called to Lincoln's Inn in 2013, and that followed an undergraduate degree in law at Queen's University Belfast, and a year abroad in the United States, where I studied a business program as part of a scholarship scheme that's run through the British Council in Northern Ireland. And then I continued on at Queen's University Belfast and did a human rights law master's degree before moving from the wee island next door to this bigger one to undertake my bar studies. So in theory, I would have got to this point and said, I completed my bar course, and then I walked into pupillage, and here I am after 10 years in practice. But that would have been, it's far too easy to relay. But hopefully the bits of what I think of as the wilderness years fill in the story in a way that is hopefully a little bit more interesting than me simply saying to you, I went to university, I went to bar school, I started pupillage, and here I am. So, and I should preface this by saying that none of what I am about to tell you is to put you off if you're considering coming to the bar. It's not about indicating that the bar is not a place for you if you're willing to work for it and you have the skill inherent within you and you're willing to stick at it. It's not meant as a cautionary tale to sort of suggest you consider doing something else. It's more what I hope. I hope the message that you take from listening to me is the importance of not giving up if this is something that you really want to do, and to realize that coming into the legal profession, whether directly or indirectly, you will have many opportunities along the way, and it's important to take advantage of those and to see what other options may open up as a result. So after I completed the bar course and I was applying for pupillage whenever I was there, including for the government legal department, I went back home to Northern Ireland to work in Herbert Smith Freehills in the office they had in Belfast. And whilst I was there, I also undertook a program of study to complete the New York bar, and that was through a law firm in Dublin. After doing that, I transferred over to the London office of Herbert Smith Freehills, was working in the dispute resolution department there, before winning a scholarship from this inn to go and work for 3 months at the European Court of Human Rights and train there as what is known as a stagiaire. I think it's French for trainee. In early 2015, whenever I returned from Strasbourg, I worked for Thomson Reuters for 5 years. So I don't know at what point you are in your studies, but if you're familiar with practical law or with Westlaw, Sweet and Maxwell textbooks, I worked for the practical law element of that company in dispute resolution, arbitration, and then covering the legal developments of Brexit as the withdrawal agreement and then the future trade and cooperation agreement were being worked out between the respective parties. And then finally, after what I have calculated to be 6 years of 100+ written applications, maybe a score of interviews, sort of every conceivable configuration possible, I finally started pupillage with the government legal department, having wanted to join and work for government since I was a bar student. And I heard somebody from the government legal department telling me about their work at an event such as this. And of course, I'm not here necessarily to sell, all of you come to the government legal department. Of course, if you want to do that, I'm sure you'd all be welcome, providing you can get through the various assessment stage. But rather, I'm here to talk about the bar in England and Wales, and that, of course, there are so many different ways in which you can pursue a career in the barrister's profession in this part of the country. So, as I said, throughout the time of all of those different work experiences, I was applying for pupillage. I was being rejected at every possible turn. I was getting so far, final round interviews, and you're always being told, oh, you're just unfortunate. There's nothing that you did wrong. It's just somebody else was better on the day. And that, of course, made me feel absolutely wonderful about myself. But the point is that I did keep going because I was determined to succeed in this profession that I had chosen, made an informed choice to pursue this profession. And along the way, people will give you lots of different advice. I'll obviously be endeavoring to give you some advice today, but that's not to say that my advice should be listened to exclusively at the expense of all others. I think you will get different advice from different people. You need to figure out what works best for you. If anything that I say to you this afternoon just you don't think applies or is complete nonsense, feel free to disregard it. I won't take offense. I'm happy to be challenged on any of it as well. But I think you figure out what works for you throughout time, and you learn to sort of sort the wheat from the chaff in that respect. So that's a very, well, I said brief. As you'll come to realize, I can talk for Ireland. That's as brief as I can be in terms of a potted history of my route to the bar thus far. The other thing I think I should mention before handing over to you, or if you need me to keep riffing, I can do, is I also do quite a lot of work with this inn as a student mentor through various schemes that exist, for example, to help people into pupillage by conducting interview workshops, application workshops. I sit on the Inn's Bar Representation Committee. I have been involved with the Bar Council as a social mobility advocate because that has become something very dear to my heart. I am the first generation in my immediate family to go to university. I'm very aware that outwardly, and before I open my mouth, you might think that guy looks like what we think lots of barristers must look like. I understand that completely, but of course, whenever you peel back the layers, I came from a family which didn't have an awful lot financially, and that's not to sort of say that we were worse off than lots of other people, but I didn't necessarily enjoy all the luxuries that a lot of my peers in this profession perhaps did whenever they were growing up. So that's one thing to bear in mind. I went to a state grammar school, is the system that exists in Northern Ireland. But I do very much believe that it doesn't, or it shouldn't matter where you're from. If you are skilled enough and you apply yourself, this profession should be one that is open to you. And now that I'm in a position to shout about it, I will keep making that message known from my point of view. So that's just where I'm coming from in the social mobility side of things. But I'm sure other things will come to me and I'll expand on them. You'll ask me a question, and then probably because I'll have been influenced in the political circles in which I work, I will think to myself, oh, that's a nice question. I'm going to answer a different one that I want to answer. But I will try very much to answer your questions. And with that, I will hand over to you now. So please do feel free to shout out, and I appreciate some people online as well.
Mm-hmm. Before we open it up, I know you mentioned that you work on the mentoring scheme as well.
Yes.
So I've had a couple of people ask about what is included in that. Could you tell us a little bit about what mentoring actually looks like?
Yeah, so I think there are a few different forms of mentoring that the Inn offers. So whenever you are a bar course student, you can apply to be allocated to a mentor or a sponsor or somebody who is a point of contact for you throughout the bar course year, assuming that's what you want to go on to do, who's there to sort of lend sort of a more informal helping hand, maybe sort of help get you familiar with some of the customs of the Inn, give you advice along the way in terms of applications. Some people may be able to offer you work experience, depending on their areas of practice. That's not something that's so easy for me to offer in the government because of the sort of different security concerns that you'll appreciate. But that's also why I come and do things like this. There's also a more formal mentoring scheme called the Pupillage Foundation Scheme. So that's designed for people after they've done the bar course. If you have unsuccessfully applied for pupillage in any given round in a year, you are entitled to apply to join this scheme, and then you will be partnered up more formally with a mentor who hopefully has some insight into the area that you're interested in going into. But we carry out sort of 4 different sort of formal sessions where you would come along. You'll engage informally with your formal mentor on those occasions, but you'd have some like a speed workshop application workshop where you go around sort of 3 or 4 other mentors on the scheme to get their perspective on your applications. We'll also do sort of mock first round interview, mock second round interview workshops, and then sort of behind the scenes, each of us will work in a more concentrated way with our formal mentees on how to improve their applications and sort of interview technique. So there are definitely things available. And then, of course, there's nothing to stop you on a more informal basis asking people for help. If you don't, as I said, that now put in a target on my back that everyone's not going to ask for help. And I do try my best to accommodate as many people with, chats, discussions as best I can. But obviously there's a limit, and you'll find as well that as you learn what interests you most, you might find it more beneficial to speak to barristers who practice in that area. If you want to be a criminal practitioner, for example, there's only so far I'm going to get you in the advice I can give, because I don't have particular insight into working at the criminal bar. But if you want to come into government, obviously, and work as a barrister, and that's in that sort of environment, or any of the other sort of areas that I've touched on in some of the other work I've done, then hopefully I would be able to sort of assist in that respect. So again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier on, that you'll find different people will give you different advice, and you'll need to tailor it, sort of pick and choose what works best for you. But don't ever be afraid of asking questions. And I'm not just saying that now to make sure this session goes smoothly, but just more generally, don't ever be afraid of asking questions. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no. Just politely say thank you, and you can see about it internally, but just move on and ask somebody else. We all learn from each other. And I think what you don't realize, perhaps, whenever you are studying, you sort of look at people in the profession, you think they must have everything figured out. We really don't. A lot of us, we are just like everyone else. We will develop our expertise, obviously, but everyone, we're trying to figure out answers as we go along. And as barristers, often you are the final port of call, and the responsibility will rest with you to try and come up with a solution that helps your client. But don't ever be afraid of asking questions, because we all have to.
Amazing. Thank you.
No problem. I told you I'd go off on one if you asked me one question.
Yeah. Does anybody here today want to ask a question?
So I'm looking for potentially the and from what you said about your experience in fact, even with the bar and the conversion being as challenging and sort of academically intense, it seems like they're actually from what you said, the easier parts of the stages, and that the actual getting pupillage appears to be the hardest part.
Oh, certainly getting pupillage is the hardest part. I mean, whenever you say the master, are you talking about the graduate diploma in law, or are you talking about the bar course, or?
MA law.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. And I should establish too, if it hasn't already been sort of told to you in the earlier part of today, so you'll find that a lot of barristers haven't done law as their undergrad. I'm one of, a number of barristers who will have studied law at university, but I don't think you're at any disadvantage from having studied something else. And I sit on scholarship panels for both graduate diploma in law and also the bar course. And, ultimately, the running theme of my advice might be is that you're trying to draw out the lessons you've learned and sort of identify the skills along the way. Direct answer to your question, pupillage, I think, is definitely the hardest part of the process. The bar course itself, in my experience, was one where there was a lot of work to fit in a very short space of time. But in terms of the content, I didn't think it was any more difficult than anything I had studied at university to date. It's just discipline in yourself, which, if you go into self-employed practice in particular, when you'll be completely responsible for your own sort of workload and time, you need to get into the habit of being able to discipline yourself. I think it used to be as part of my pupillage with government, I did 6 months seconded in a set of barristers' chambers, and I remember speaking to some folks there who sat on the pupillage committee, who said that it used to be, it was relatively straightforward, to say relatively, to get pupillage because they didn't have to pay you to do pupillage. The challenge was then getting what's known as tenancy, so being able to stay on in chambers after you've completed pupillage. But I think now it's sort of the reverse. It's much more difficult to get pupillage, but once you're in that environment, you will find, and I have found, doors start to open up more for you. And I'm in a slightly different environment. Obviously, within government, I was working towards a specific, government place on the assumption, that I didn't, do anything wrong. It would have disqualified me from qualifying into government. But even if you theoretically complete pupillage, and the chambers in which you complete pupillage doesn't offer you tenancy, there are sort of other chambers you can go to, because you will be qualified at the end of the day, and you sort of just apply to go into chambers and what used to be known as third six pupillages, but I think they're now trying to call them probationary tenancies, because it sort of perhaps more accurately reflects the fact that you are qualified after you've completed the pupillage year. So look, I've unpacked a few things off your question, but hopefully that addresses what you were hoping for me to address.
I've got a question from online. Somebody's asking, how did you go about choosing which inn to be a member at?
So there's the truthful, fun answer to this, and there's the sort of more serious question, response to the question. The truthful answer is, I met a girl whenever I was a student and did a mooting competition here at Lincoln's Inn, and I met somebody and thought, whenever it came time to apply for an inn, oh, that's the one I know for that reason, so I will apply to Lincoln's Inn. Yes, so what I was going to address on that basis is that, obviously, if it wasn't for the fact that all of the inns perform a very similar function, and it's not like university, I suppose, in a way, the inns they're all ancient institutions, they all perform similar functions. They are there to support you throughout your professional life. So many people have many different reasons for choosing the inns. Of course, that was one part of the calculation, but I'd also, sort of enjoyed the experience I'd had. Things like Lincoln's Inn is the biggest inn, it's the oldest inn. I think it's the inn with the most sort of Supreme Court sort of justices historically, and sort of there's also the element of what is known to people. So you will find that this inn is very international, and in my sort of ignorance, what I've learned from speaking to international friends and colleagues is that in lots of different places, Lincoln's Inn is the inn that is known in their home countries, and that's the reason they choose to come to Lincoln's Inn, because it's the one that is recognized. But there really is no right or wrong answer. People will choose it for different reasons, and truthfully, as I say, I met somebody. I should say that relationship didn't work out eventually, in part because I wanted to pursue a career at the bar. But it's sort of horses for courses, whatever works best for you individually. And I think it's worth going to the different inn events and getting to know sort of the environment, getting to know sort of the staff. No, I don't think it's. I don't know anyone who's done it. So you join. Every barrister has to join one inn of court. I think there are ways in which you can later become a member of another, can't you? If you pay, but it's a sort of quite a convoluted process, and it's still not your home inn. I think there are. I'm not the expert on this at all. I don't work for the inn. I'm not entirely sure how that sort of works. All I know is I had to join one. I did a mooting competition. And that's where I met somebody, because that's how cool I am. So yeah, but then whenever international students can certainly get pupillage. I mean, I'm not going to comment on the way sort of visas and all of that works. That's sort of beyond sort of my expertise. But, ultimately, if you're able to work in the country, if we take that as a given, so there's no reason why you can't, as long as you have the qualifying law degree, whether that's an undergraduate law degree or you've done the graduate diploma in law. And I don't know what other factors you may need to satisfy, but there's no reason why you can't pursue pupillage. And I know lots of barristers who aren't from the United Kingdom. Yeah. Sorry, it was just somebody behind you. Can I come back to you? Sorry. Why did I decide to be a barrister? I will get to your answer. I told you I'd do this, but so this is important. What I'd say is first is that you've asked a question of me, which is it's basically the number one essay question on every pupillage application form you will see is, why do you want to be a barrister? And lots of people will answer that question by saying, oh, I want to be a barrister because I want to speak publicly. I want to be self-employed, for those who want to be self-employed. And they'll sort of trot out these answers, which are sort of quite frankly, they may be true, but they're, sort of derivative, sort of it's the same theme you see time and again. I was guilty of that myself. And one of the best pieces of advice I got sort of towards the end of the 6 years of my applying was basically, just go back to first principles and be honest. Why is it that you wanted to come to the bar? And so I started to think about the personal things that had shaped my life. So did growing up in Northern Ireland, you sort of born at the end of the 80s, 10 years of the Troubles still to play out before the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998. So politics surrounded me whenever I was growing up, and also this sense that because you lived in a divided society, you had to be very careful about what you said in public. And I never sort of liked the fact that I always had to watch what I said. And I've always been sort of quite performative in a way. I do like public speaking, I like sort of doing theatre productions, all of that stuff at school. But also I am a very opinionated person, in part because I was surrounded by that, on sort of every conceivable side growing up. And then sort of the influence of people within my family as well. I said, first in my family to go to university didn't necessarily come from an awful lot of money, but came from a very supportive, sort of hardworking family who obviously had sort of much more direct experience of living with the Troubles, but then also sort of learning from the tolerance and moderation that I'm fortunate to have experienced with my family, and that sort of understanding that different people, you can fundamentally disagree with them, but everyone has a point of view. And I always thought it was interesting to sort of argue, sort of you can advocate for sort of a particular point of view that you're passionate about, but also there's a skill in being able to understand somebody else's perspective and then speak out for those people whenever they're not able to do it themselves. So all of that sort of upbringing shaped my sort of outlook on things. And then whenever I looked at what I sort of felt I was good at, what I was skilled at, I quite like the idea of the bar. And I think it's quite funny. I work in DEFRA at the moment. The first time I ever remember properly public speaking was taking part in a school debate at 11 years of age on whether it was moral to keep animals in zoos. And now zoos are part of my portfolio within DEFRA. And it's quite nice that that's sort of come full circle. But as time went on, there was also an element of stubbornness where I was constantly being told no. I was perceiving that I was being told no by people who perhaps hadn't had the same sort of obstacles or challenges, or perhaps had sort of had a slightly easier path through, whether it was by going to a particular type of school or university or sounding a particular way. And quite frankly, the stubbornness comes in where I was sick of being told no by people I thought had no right to tell me no because they didn't know me or didn't know my skills. So there's a number of different things in there in terms of my personal motivation, but in terms of advice for you, I'd think, why is it that you want to do this? Or the solicitor's profession, if you decide to do that as well, and reflect on on what your motivations actually are, and then find a way to articulate that much more clearly than I've done this afternoon. Because you'll find whenever it comes to applications or interviews, you want to sort of show a through line where you have thought seriously about this profession. It's a serious profession. You want to show that your decision has been well considered and that the different things you've done have logically led you to this point. But that starts with, you know, what is your reason? I'm not putting you on the spot and asking you, but what is your reason for wanting to come to the bar? And I'm sure it'll be a different reason than the person sitting next to you or in front of you or behind you or me, you know. So hopefully that is food for thought. Yeah, no worries. Can I come back to you, because I know the gentleman had another question?
I think sort of what was asked, kind of what would be the best advice that you could give for sort of getting the foot in the door with people, because you know, like definitely not from the traditional going those things, you know, you're really fast families out there, it is to more
Yeah.
So what would be considering how people competitive it is to get people more to be sort of the best advice kind of
I think I would say that one thing in response to that question, it's coming back to that theme of taking every opportunity. So whether that's coming to an event like this and just asking questions and always asking questions just to learn about the profession, you have to start somewhere. You know, do those things, obviously. And then, as I said, taking every opportunity, you know, I try and look at those wilderness years as the fact that had I got pupillage straight away, I wouldn't have done any of those other really interesting things. I wouldn't have met some of the people that I've met, including my wife. You know, I wouldn't have done, you know, any number of different things, but all of those helped me to build up the experience and expertise to a certain degree where I could go and talk about, you know, a particular subject area, you know, with some degree of authority because I sort of knew it. I think as well, knowing, second thing, if you have an idea of what subject area you might like to go into, try and inform yourself about that area as much as possible, you know, more than the other people, because if you have a good grasp of that to begin with and then couple it with commercial awareness, which will only come from speaking to people, asking those questions, then that's where you start. But just look out for opportunities regardless of what they are. You'll find that if you go on to do the bar course, even though pupillage itself may not necessarily be immediately forthcoming, it should, you know, doing that course is a statement of intent, and it should open up opportunities for relevant legal experience as well. Apply for many pupillages. So you can, as I said, you might just get an opportunity to shadow somebody from asking them in person, but if you start doing your research on different chambers, wherever else, you'll find that a lot of them do offer many pupillages, and you just apply directly. And don't be disheartened if you don't sort of get onto those, but there are lots of different things. And then if you decide to pursue the bar course and join in of court, you know, the inns will have lots of different support available, whether it's helping to facilitate some work experience in that way, or to sort of put you in touch with a judge where you can go and shadow a judge. So it's, I can't sort of say do this one specific thing, but sort of, you know, having an open mind to whatever it is. And the other reason being that sort of you can also identify, it's also useful to identify what you don't think is for you, what you don't like. And sort of having that as a, you know, point of comparison whenever you're asked the question, why this area of law, for example.
Yeah.
So you said the word that
No.
I'm thinking about working in law firms, and I realized that going to the bar, you have to
Yeah. So I was a paralegal. So that's how I went about that. So applied for a position that was open in the Belfast office. I think they called them legal assistants at the time. And then whenever I transferred to London, sort of into a paralegal position. And you don't need to be a qualified barrister solicitor to do those things, and that sort of helps you get practical experience. And it could be depending on where you go as well, like paralegals in our team, for example, and sort of in GLD that I've encountered, tend to do the work a lot of the time that's very similar to junior sort of lawyers. Some of them may have their own sort of cases that obviously, will get oversight by sort of people are qualified and get signed off, but they will help feed into, the research and everything that goes on. It could be that sort of in bigger places that are well resourced, you may find that you're sort of running about a bit more, sort of doing sort of simple things for other people. It could be that you go into a high street firm and it's all hands on deck and you really get stuck in that way. But again, it comes back to the point I was making about just looking out for those opportunities. I think it's useful to get some experience in a solicitor's firm and see that side of the profession, and then understand what solicitors want from barristers. And then whenever you go into the bar, I think it helps you to understand what solicitors would want from you. In GLD, sort of we are all government lawyers first and foremost, so I work in a team and it's made up of both solicitors and barristers, and it's slightly different the way practice is because of the nature of government, but you obviously you learn different skills from the different disciplines. I mean, the honest answer is, well, I don't use the New York bar qualification day to day. I don't know if it gave me an edge in any sort of interview. It's not something that I need to practice here. I think it's a useful string to my bow, but I'm always nervous bringing up the New York bar thing sort of in a conversation about the English bar, not because I'm saying don't do it if it's something you're interested in, but it's something I think that perhaps sounds that it opens more doors than it sort of does in reality, unless I pursued something specifically related to sort of New York practice or an American law firm, for example. But I think I've been interested in international law and things in the past, so I always thought it was useful to have the perspective of both sort of the two big sort of global financial sort of commercial centers in London and in New York. But I sort of again was went in with open eyes that it's not necessary to have that to practice at the bar in England and Wales, and unless you're doing particular types of work, it's yet to be something that I've actually had to use in practice.
Anything else from you? Yep.
Yeah, so I think that you would be surprised at how much you can improve an application just by getting the structure of your answers into good shape. So there are a number of ways that you can do this. If you are asked a question such as describe a time when you demonstrated leadership or teamwork, my instinct is to start thinking along what's called the STAR criteria. So what was the overall situation in the context? What task were you set? What actions did you take? And what was the result? And you work through it methodically like that. If it's a question like your friend along the row asked me earlier about why do I want to be a barrister, then I'm thinking, right, I want 3 clear points. And I didn't answer that question with 3 clear points, but there's always an exception to the rule. And you're sort of signposting it clearly first, second, third, because that shows clarity of thought. And if you can have a good structure, it shows that you're thinking like a barrister. Because if you think about it, if you give a client advice and they want to ask a question, they can say, oh, I want to refer back to paragraph 6 or whatever, and you've got it clearly set out so they can easily refer back. Or again, if you're sort of setting a clear structure and you're in court and a judge is following it along and making a note, and so the judge might say to you, it's like, oh, I'm with you on your second point, let's just move on to your third. It's always good to try and have a good structure in place. And then I think, so that's first point is STAR, second point is 3 points, and then the third point Oh, mine's about to go blank now as well. My third point as well is to make sure that, you know, every question on the form is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. So don't just assume that one that says, oh, what were your academic qualifications, what's your work experience? Don't just assume that you just say, oh, I, you know, worked doing this, and then move on, because that doesn't really, I mean, people can glean from it, but we want to know that you have reflected and can demonstrate what you've learned and how that's going to benefit you. So in terms of using every opportunity for every question, you know, think about those answers. Like, what's your work experience? You know, describe it first and foremost. You're going to see another pattern of 3 here. Firstly, describe it. Then secondly, reflect on what you learned from the experience. And then thirdly, sort of indicate that, you know, you'll take that lesson into practice because you think it'll benefit you in this way. So it's a 3-pronged approach sort of throughout. And, you know, I think if you can think in those structured ways and present it as such and show that you are commercially aware, that you are self-evaluative, if that's a word, then it's going to make your application stand out. Because I've seen a lot of applications, you know, we get them for scholarships, obviously, and through the mentorship scheme. It's amazing how many people have really brilliant stuff on there, but it doesn't present well because it's just a muddle of different stuff, and it's not really getting towards a point, much like a lot of what I'm probably saying this afternoon. So hopefully that helps. And then you'll find, obviously, that the more you do it, the better you'll get, and then the more experiences you have, that'll lead you to get other experiences as well, to the point where it might come a time when you start to actually tailor your applications by picking and choosing which pieces of work experience to apply for. So if you're applying exclusively to criminal sets and you've got 12 mini pupilages, which I'm not saying you need to go out and get, but say you've got like 8 commercial, you know, mini pupilages, is a criminal set going to be as interested in reading about those as they are about you sort of properly setting out your 4 criminal mini pupilages and showing them what they've learned? I don't know. You know, different people have different perspectives, but you know, one opportunity will hopefully lead to another.
I'll also say about in terms of tailoring your applications, that's just good advice for any application you do, whether that's work or otherwise. You want to make sure that you're putting the skills that are relevant for the role that you're applying for forward. So yeah, sorry.
A lot of people say that going for different characters, like, do you have any tips?
Oh, I think it's free theater. No, it is definitely worth doing. I think you'd be surprised sometimes as well, and perhaps reassured whenever you see some barristers who aren't, you know, particularly flamboyant in their advocacy. Some of it is just very straight-laced and it gets to the point. And I think it's definitely useful to see different people and their different styles. I will have a very different style to, you know, sort of colleagues, obviously. And comes back to then spelling out in your application form what you've learned. You know, one of the things you might learn is that a particular barrister is brilliant at summing up because of the metaphors they use, or because of the emphasis they place, or the pace, or the volume, or something like that. You might find that another barrister is particularly good at cross-examining because they ask tight, controlled questions. They're not asking questions to which they don't already know the answer. And you'll definitely learn different things from different people and the way they approach it. So absolutely sort of go. There's different things are available online now as well, but I think it certainly helps, because the other thing as well is you never know when you might have the opportunity just to run into a barrister afterwards and say, oh, I've just been watching you in court, I'm interested in coming to the bar, do you mind if I bend your ear for a minute? Again, the worst thing they can say is no. And again, you can quietly see on the inside, but you get your face known more generally as well. I'm never out of this in, you know, sort of, I cemented myself whenever I was a student because pupillage wasn't forthcoming, and I just wanted to learn as much and get seen as much and show that I was interested. and then I get qualified and I just can't tear myself away from the place. But that's partly because I know how valuable it was for me as a student. So definitely get seen and go to as many events, free things as you can. Yeah.
You need to register with one of the ends and apply for a tenancy even for applying for a job at a law firm as a barrister.
You need to be a member of an inn, yeah, regardless. All barristers have to be a member of one of the 4 inns of court. Yeah.
Regardless of the application.
Yeah, so the inn is sort of it's a formality, sort of all barristers, because this is where you will be called to the bar. And it goes on your practicing certificate. So if you look me up on the Bar Standards Board website, it will give my name, the address where I practice, and the date I was called to the bar, as well as my inn of court. But it's not like you'll apply to a set of chambers or a law firm if you wanted to go in-house as an employed barrister. It's not like they're going to judge you on the basis that you're a member of one inn and not another.
Being an employed barrister, and like after
Yeah, I won't answer directly on pay, other than to say that, so obviously, there are, if I take pay first, if you are in the commercial bar, for example, chances are you will be at the top end of earners. Obviously, I have a salary which will have a cap. So I'm not necessarily going to be making the same money that a commercial barrister at, sort of top commercial set is going to be making. However, I make, a respectable, salary with a decent enough, benefits package. I get, civil service pension, and a much better work-life balance, paid annual leave. And sort of at this stage, I'm not going to sort of prejudge what ages people in the audience are, but it's sort of at this stage you might think, oh, why is any of that important? And it's like, whenever I'm sort of looking ahead at, starting a family, it's sort of my wife, I'm starting a family and thinking, bills to pay. It's like, it's nice having some security that you could perhaps be a little bit laissez-faire about whenever I was starting out. But the other thing to note as well is that there was a report came out, I can't remember, it was the Bar Council or something, last year or earlier this year, and sort of looking at a variety of different things at the bar. And the thing that I find interesting was, I know what it was, the report was pointing out the disparity between the pay of men and women barristers at the self-employed bar. And what I thought was interesting then was if you take away the sort of quite shocking disparity that still existed in that respect, sort of it was saying that the average men barrister salary for the self-employed bar in England and Wales was something like £86,000. Now that will obviously incorporate, people who are working on legal aid in family law or criminal law, perhaps up to those people that are doing commercial law. So there's obviously a big, sort of bell curve there. But if you are making the average earnings there, and then you have to arrange for your own tax affairs to be taken care of. You have to contribute to your own pension. If you want to do that, you're not getting paid holidays. Like, very soon, all of that, I don't know then, when you take everything away, how much more you're on comparatively somebody who's in a comfortable position in the employed bar. But for me, the employed bar, has the things about it that, I think are sort of really worth selling. It is nice having that work-life balance. It's nice having security. It's nice knowing that I've got sort of good work coming in. But sort of the fact that I work in the employed bar was almost a secondary consideration. I wanted to work for government because I'm interested in public law. I'm interested in the interaction between the political world and the legal world. I wanted to be involved with advising on sort of the law around government policy, advising on legislation being made. and getting involved in high profile, potentially complex work at a much earlier stage. And I do think the variety of work that I get in government, I couldn't get anywhere else. And as I say, it's probably not going to be for, some of you in this room. Others might listen to this and think, oh, that sounds exactly like what I want to do. My advice is to go with what you are interested in first and foremost. You'll enjoy it more, you'll get more from it, and you'll be better at it. I think the fact that I happen to be an employed barrister sort of comes second to that, but that's not to say that I'm not thankful for being an employed barrister. So hopefully that sort of addresses some of the things you were touching on behind the question. I know there was behind you was just looking, and then I'll bring you in. Hi.
That you did throughout the years,
Yeah. I think it's that Father Ted quote. It's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? It was practice, which was much funnier in the show because Ted was like trying to answer the question, or Dougal was trying to answer the question literally. I think I think there's a lot of, start again. In the profession, you will find a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and it might seem that everyone comes across as really confident to you, and everyone on the inside will have some sort of insecurity. And I think it's healthy at times to think, I don't really belong here, because it keeps you on your toes. I do think practice, being serious obviously does help. But bear in mind that it could be that you practice in an area of the bar which doesn't actually involve an awful lot of public speaking. I don't go to court very much in my role. I exercise my advocacy skills in other ways, whether it's, working with clients, obviously, more directly, or sort of working with government ministers, or, your written advocacy skills. So you can exercise those in different ways. But I think, sometimes you need to push through sort of the initial thing, and you will find, I've always found that with public speaking, you sort of get the initial sort of nervous excitement, but you start to enjoy it as you go along, and sort of get comfortable on stage, or in stage. This is the performer in me, in court. So again, whenever you're looking at the different experiences that you think might help you, think about things beyond law, where you might get some experience of public speaking. I like coming and doing these sorts of things. It's much less pressure in some ways than sort of going into court. Although your questions do keep me on my toes. But if you're interested in sort of, I used to do as I said, theater productions and stuff whenever I was at school. Whenever I was at college in the United States, we would have done sort of performing on stage. And again, just go with what you enjoy doing. But if you don't think public speaking is for you, perhaps you go for an element of the profession where that's not going to be part and parcel of it. I mean, obviously, you can go along and try your hand at debating, try your hand at mooting, because not only is that going to improve your public speaking skills, but it's going to, sort of teach you how to argue in a structured way. Should have led with those, sort of debating and mooting. And if you join the Inn, you will be able to come along to debating and mooting. And you'd be surprised as well that the number of people who haven't actually done it before they get to bar school, and they learn from the workshops here. And we'll insist that you get up and give it a go. And again, my approach to a lot of these things is ultimately, what is the worst that's going to happen? And there's never, if you're in court, for example, or in any other environment, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, as long as you can then sort of go and find the answer and sort of report back. Or there's nothing wrong with saying, can I have a moment? Because it's better that you say something which is informed and which is correct than just spouting off for the sake of it. And I know in this environment, I'm sort of, filling time by saying things while I think of something else that's clever to say to answer your question. But in sort of the real sort of professional world, there's nothing wrong with taking it slow and being methodical and thinking, and all of that will just come with practice. And whenever you're on the bar course, assuming that's what you go on to do, I'm assuming they still do this, you're recorded whenever you're doing your advocacy classes, and then you sort of go away as part of your sort of homework. If we could sort of come up with a less patronizing way of phrasing it, please let me know. You'll go and review yourself, and it's amazing the things that you pick up on. And I am that vain person that will go away whenever this goes up online, and I will watch it back, and I will cringe over every verbal tick that I pick up on that you're probably not noticing. I will cringe at all of those stop-start moments where I was too eager to answer a question and I started into it and then had to backtrack because I knew that I was getting myself tied up in knots. But it's amazing that the different things that you can see if you watch yourself back. But I refer back to Father Ted at the very beginning, practice is the way to Carnegie Hall. Well, so if you go on to the Pupillage Gateway website, Pupillage Gateway is sort of like your UCAS thing for pupillages. So not every place that offers pupillage will do its application through the gateway system, but every pupillage that is available should be advertised on Pupillage Gateway. And then you can search for, by area of law, by parts of the country. And that, I think might be a helpful way to start focusing your search. If you have a broad idea on what you want to do, or say you want to maybe try your hand at a few different things, then common law sets might be the way to go initially. So they will sort of do a mix of, for example, criminal, civil, family. Yeah. Okay. So again, yeah, if you should be able to find out more if you sort of like filter your searches. I know Alexis was telling you about some of the student forums and stuff whenever I was coming in, or those sorts of websites. One I quite liked, and I'm not paid to advertise this by any means, obviously, but lawcareers.net was one I used to use, and it used to advertise different pupillages as well. You had to be careful because it wasn't always up to date with the adverts or the deadlines and things like that. But just start sort of filtering your search, or there's nothing wrong with just going on to Google, other websites, search engines are available, and sort of punching in barristers, chambers who do this area of law or whatever else. But yeah, then you can go on to their websites once you've sort of identified who they are and sort of learn a bit more about it that way.
We've got time for one more.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, did you?
I think it may be a better question.
There's somebody up there, but
Yeah.
I could.
Just want to know how your usual workday is like, considering that you don't go to office.
At the moment, so I work as I'm an advisory lawyer at the moment. So I have sort of like 3 broad projects or things sort of within my portfolio that I advise on. So at the moment it could be, ministers are considering a policy, so they want advice on what options they have to achieve that policy. So I'll be sort of, contributing to submissions that are going to ministers. Sometimes there might be a trickier question that requires more detailed thought, so I will sort of do a longer note of advice. Every barrister will tell you that there is no typical day, but there have been times, I have gone into Parliament whilst a bill I've been advising on has been going through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, so that I'm on hand should any urgent legal advice be needed. Whenever I did do some work in litigation previously, so you're drafting statements of case, sort of obviously sometimes negotiating settlements as well with the other side. So there is a lot of variety, and within government as well, you're encouraged to move around quite a bit, especially early on, to see what works for you and what you like, and then you sort of become a better lawyer by having a different perspective on different areas as well.
Probably squeeze one more. Anyone? Do you have a question that you want to ask?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I think one thing from the research I've done, that most barristers are self-employed in chambers. Why do you think that most barristers really choose that option? Is it to do with, kind of getting inside of hours, not necessarily a boss?
Well, yeah, there'd be a number of different factors. The fact is, there are more self-employed positions at the bar available, and I think like 80% of barristers are self-employed, something like that, and they'll be different. Everyone will have their different motivations for going into particular areas of the bar. And yeah, for any number of those reasons, people might say it's like, I make my own hours, I'm my own boss, sort of I can sort of have unlimited earning potential, whatever else. Those might be the reasons that people go in. But as I say, go with what interests you first and foremost, and also sort of know that, hopefully you get to where you want to go, and your careers will be long ones, and you'll have the opportunity to do different things. I mean, if I can sort of more generally sort of leave you with something that I'm keen to try. I did this with a group of students at a Sutton Trust event, and they seemed to take something from it. But I was saying at the beginning about the difficulties I had in getting pupillage, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that if you come from a background which is perhaps not traditionally reflected in the bar, you think there are sort of these unwritten conventions and etiquettes that you must abide by, and you mustn't do anything to be disruptive or upset the apple cart in any way. You must play the game by rules that are unwritten and that have been made up almost exclusively designed to exclude you. And sort of from having spoken with mentors I've had and reflecting on, being true to your own motivations, it's like it never hurts sometimes just to throw caution to the wind, because this profession needs people from all sorts of different backgrounds, because you will have different perspectives. And from my point of view, the profession will only get better the more it is representative of society as a whole. And there is something that I'm a big Tim Minchin fan, if you're familiar with Tim Minchin, and that includes Matilda the musical, which either you've seen the stage version or you've seen the film version. And there's a song that Tim Minchin wrote for Matilda, and it very much speaks to me, because it's really about not taking no for an answer and making your own luck, which you will have to do. So if you'll bear with me, I'm not going to sing it, but the song is called Naughty, and I'd like to close with this, and for the benefit of those online, and I'm crediting Tim Minchin because I know this will go live on the website. I want to cover myself legally that I'm not plagiarizing this in any way, shape, or form. But the song concludes, because if you're little, you can do a lot. You mustn't let a little thing like little stop you. If you sit around and let them get on top, you won't change a thing. Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you always take it on the chin and wear it, you might as well be saying you think that it's okay, and that's not right. And if it's not right, you have to put it right. But nobody else is going to put it right for me. Nobody but me is going to change my story. Sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty. So go out there, disrupt, sort of make your case, be your own advocate, sell yourself, and I hope you all have really successful careers, whether it's at the bar or at anything else you choose to do. I'm here if you want to ask me any questions one-to-one for a few minutes before I go, but best of luck, everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jack. Well, yeah, that pretty much concludes today's activities. Thank you all for joining us in person or online. Thank you, Jack, for volunteering your time to be here today and your beautiful song. But yes, thank you very much for joining. Have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully we'll see each other again very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Lorenzo, you have to end the presentation because my laptop died. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.